Please. We last worked through just the first verse of Psalm 127, which says, "Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh, but in vain." This is written by Solomon, an emphasis on having God involved in the daily affairs of life. And he started off with that double picture. The person building is going to be building without profit. The watchman is going to be watching without security unless they invite God in, unless they are involving God in the process. Solomon in verse 2, which is our focus tonight, is going to extend this metaphor, develop this picture further. He says in verse 2, in a very Solomon-like turn of phrase, "It is vain for you to rise up early, to sit up late, to eat the bread of sorrows, for so he giveth his beloved sleep." I've entitled our message tonight, "The Bread of Sorrows and the Gift of Sleep." The bread of sorrows and the gift of sleep. How many of you recently have heard in the term of the working life, you've heard it referred to recently as the grind. The grind. You heard that? Back to the grind, okay? We refer to it just as to go back to work. Sometimes use it casually. Sometimes we use it exactly as it sounds. You know, I'm going to go back in there and it's exhausting, it's monotonous, it's challenging. I'm going to go back into that grind. And this evening, we're going to look at the grind that God calls vain. The grind that God calls vain. Our context is still doing more, but doing it without God. Doing more, but doing it without God. As we look at verse 2, it says, "It is vain for you to rise up early, to sit up late, to eat the bread of sorrows." I'm going to mention this again as we go through it. Solomon is not criticizing hard work. We've read the book of Proverbs. We know what he says to the sluggard in a number of places. Tells the sluggard to go to the ant. He talks about the sluggard being the man that turns around in his bed like a hinge on a door. Solomon here is not promoting sloth, but he is saying that you can work as no one else works and produce what no one else can and find it's worthless, that it's a failure, or worse yet, it's incredibly successful and you never get to enjoy it. So as he emphasizes here in verse 2, we're going to look at this through three slightly different lenses as we cycle through this opening thought. First, I want us to see this, that our work ethic does not guarantee prosperity. Our work ethic does not guarantee prosperity. I'll just be completely frank here. This is a little bit uncomfortable for me to preach because we don't have a lack of work ethic. It's not like there's too much hard work ethic around and we need to temper it down. The opposite in the extreme is true, but this is what our text is dealing with. This is the hustle lifestyle. This is the 5 to 9, then the 9 to 5, then the 5 to 11 kind of a lifestyle here. And the doing as much as I can so that I can have the security that I have earned myself. And Solomon says, he emphasizes that a work ethic does not guarantee prosperity. Okay, I make a bold statement here. Trusting in myself, I'll say that generally, our context here specifically is my own ability to produce my security. Trusting in myself is functional atheism. It is functional atheism because I am living as if God is absent. I am living as if God is absent. I'm going to be the watchman on the walls that come what may, I will keep us safe. I am going to be the builder with the might of my right arm. I will create, I will establish. I sound something like Nimrod and Satan in these statements as they're building their works or projecting themselves on high. When I say it is all on me and I've got this, I am living in a functional atheism. When we treat God as an abstract idea, I don't mean what you believe, I mean what you're doing. What I am doing. When I treat God as an abstract idea or a lifestyle choice, rather than the true and living God that He is, when we do that, we start living with His laws as suggestions and His standards, at best, dated ideals from a long time ago. Living as if God is absent. Closely aligned with this is living with the expectation that God will fail. God will fail. Sure, I'll pray about it, but okay, I'll do that. I'll read that. I'll think about that. But living with the expectation that God will not come through. It's praying without faith that God can accomplish what I've requested. Living in a constant state, a typical, a normal state of self-reliance that disregards God's ability or His willingness to meet my request. We would never write that on paper and sign our name to it. But do we live it? Living as if God is absent, living with the expectation that God will fail, living as though God will not judge others so I can get bent out of shape about it, or myself, that I can get away with it. I've defined this as a general state of unconcern about the slow creep of sin into my speech, my media consumption, my associations, and ideals. Manifestations, we talked in the Sunday school recently, white lies. Those are also known as mythical lies, okay? Lies are lies. White lies are acceptable. Relationships, friendships, are a means to an end. The church must cater to my wants and preferences. I am a paying member and I want fill in the blank. It's a country club mentality. Living as though God will not judge. When we have to get up early and go down late because everything depends on me, my heart level decision is that I'm acting like there's no builder, there's no keeper, and there's no provider. The kind of stress that I bring onto myself there isn't just dangerous levels of stress. It reveals a misplaced trust. Trust that rests solely right here is always misplaced. Trust that rests solely with you is always misplaced. My work ethic does not guarantee prosperity. This is the work, the grind that God calls vain. I want us to see as well that taking the reins of my life, I am taking control. Taking the reins of my life may be the result of an idolatry of control. I am worshiping my own need to be in control. Don't raise your hand. How many of you struggle with not being in control? Okay, you know, we all do it to an extent, but for some of us, it's a real struggle all the time. If I cannot yield the outcomes to God, I may be building an idol of control in my heart. Let me have us consider some of the following examples. I'll run through these quickly. How about King Saul? He had to control perception and the outcomes. Public opinion, timing, winning at any cost. He offered sacrifices when he feared losing people. He had to be in control. He made executive decisions when he wasn't the executive, to spare Agag, to spare some of the spoil, to manage the optics and then blamed people. He had to be in control. Abraham and Sarah, they controlled God's promise with their own man-made shortcuts. God will give you a son through Sarah. Well, culture around us, they have a workaround for this. We have the surrogate mother. We'll just do that. Everyone else, that's just what everyone else is doing. We're still seeing the fallout of that, aren't we? Jacob tried to be in control through just raw manipulation. A master instinctual manipulator. He controlled security, relationships, obtaining a blessing through his own manipulation. And it got him what he wanted to an extent, but at what cost? Israel in the wilderness. They controlled fear with substitutes. Moses didn't come down. What's happened? I don't know. We can control this. God never gave us a form. Let's build him a familiar one. And they built the golden calf. King Asa, rather than relying on God, he decided to take control into his own hands, begin to make alliances with the other major nations around them. He leaned on Syria and Ben-Hadad. Later, he relied on physicians for health rather than seeking the Lord. Jonah tried to control God's mercy. Who would get grace and who wouldn't? If I go there, God might forgive those people, so I'm going to go anywhere else. Are we guilty of trying to control grace by deciding who it is that is the kind of person that we give the gospel to and who is the kind of person that we wouldn't? Pharaoh controlled people, tried to control a situation by resisting God. Nebuchadnezzar tried to control the glory by saying, "Is I, great Nebuchadnezzar, that have built all of this?" Even Martha tries to maintain a measure of control of organizing and orchestrating service rather than seeking the Lord. All kinds of different flavors of people in the Bible who dealt with this same real issue of the idol of the I must have it, I must focus on it, the idol of being in control. Solomon will say in Ecclesiastes 2:22, "For what hath man of all his labor, and of the vexation of his heart wherein he hath labored under the sun? For all his days are sorrow, and his travail grief, yea, his heart taketh not rest in the night. This is also vanity. My work ethic does not guarantee prosperity. My sacrifices cannot secure God's favor." I think we read verse 2, we see sacrifice clearly described for us. Rising up early, sitting up late. Burn the candle on both ends, doing what I have to do to get done what I want to get done. Again, we're not talking down about, we're not denigrating hard work. But we're saying, I have to make it happen. I'm going to get it done. I can't rely on God. I can't rely on others. All I can rely on is me, and I'm going to get it done. My sacrifices cannot secure God's favor. I have to understand this. God governs results. Results are not obtained by my effort alone. This is an oversimplification, and I know that, but grab hold of the thought. We don't just rely on God for the extras. He's essential for the whole thing. We don't just rely on God for the emergency room. He needs to be part of our home, not just the hospital visit. He's not the extras. He's not the emergency room. God is in control of all the affairs of life, and we need to recognize that truth. Both the building, the watching, and the providing. Yes, Psalm 127 assumes that you're going to work. It assumes you're going to watch. It is warning against believing that your effort is the pinnacle, the ultimate. God's not the add-on. He's essential. God also is one that brings blessings and withholds them. In Haggai chapter 1, Haggai is bringing God's message to the people that they have got their priorities swapped. They're building fancy houses for themselves while leaving God's house that they have been commanded to rebuild left in disarray. And he tells them in Haggai verse 1, or chapter 1, verse 5, now therefore, thus saith the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. Hey, stop and think about this. Look at what's going on. Verse 6, ye have sown much and bring in little. Ye eat, but ye have not enough. Ye drink, but you're not filled with drink. Ye clothe you, but there's none warm. And he that earneth wages to put it into a bag with holes. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. Hard work, intense labor cannot outproduce God's judgment. Go ahead and fill the bag, it's got no bottom. Careful planning does not outmaneuver God's chastisement. Never has, never will. Even deep sacrifice does not secure a prosperous future without God's blessing. Work ethic does not guarantee prosperity. Sacrifices cannot secure God's favor. And my striving with God does not produce enduring benefits. When we look here, it says it is vain, it's empty for you to rise up early and sit up late. Let's look at a parallel thought from the lips of Jesus Christ. Turn to Matthew chapter 6. Matthew chapter 6. This is not sitting here and looking down on getting up early, working hard. The sleep of a laboring man is sweet. That this is not talking about that. Matthew chapter 6 and verse 31. Jesus says, therefore take no thought, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or wherewithal shall we be clothed? For after all these things do the Gentiles seek. For your heavenly Father knoweth that ye have need of these things. But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Take no thought doesn't mean stop thinking. It's don't be fixated, worried, anxious. Don't be consumed with, well, what are we gonna eat, drink, or wear? Psalm 127:2. It's vain to rise up early, to sit up late, to eat the bread of sorrows. That's the picture of a person whose life, whose schedule, whose thinking is dominated by worry. Jesus in Matthew assumes that you're going to have jobs and meals and clothes and responsibility. Solomon assumes there's builders and watchmen in need for provision. But they're both condemning man's effort as the ultimate source of security. Don't allow your labor to become your God, your primary identity, and certainly not your source of peace. I need to move on. Anxious work can still be wasted work, but settled faithfulness, a settled faithfulness in the workplace brings prosperity. Let's turn to Proverbs chapter 10, verse 22. As we work our way back toward our text. Proverbs chapter 10, verse 22. The blessing of the Lord, it maketh rich, and he addeth no sorrow with it. Doing the task, the work, the labor that God has given you, God's way brings blessings. And here's the awesome thing. It doesn't matter what you're doing. When you do whatsoever ye do as to the Lord and not unto men, you are in the path that God blesses. It doesn't matter what you are doing. It matters who, someone over there, or God, who you try to honor through it. And God's blessing is the key ingredient to success, to safety, and to peace. Working hard is a testimony of righteousness. Listen, where we are right now in society, simple, honest, hard work has never looked so good because it's increasingly rare. The character of our national workforce is very poor. So, your faithfulness stands out. It's abnormal. Your calm demeanor under pressure stands out. When I visited Brian and Trudy in the hospital in Hershey, I stopped by Walmart on the way home. And while I was in Walmart on the way home, an employee was running through the word, screaming, repeated profanity phrase, screaming it, like rage screaming through the whole store, the same series of 5 or 6 words, most of which is profanity. And people all throughout the store ran to the aisle he was running through and screamed it back at him. No, you, and then they repeated what he was saying. He didn't know them, they didn't know him. He was lost his mind about something, and there must have been a half dozen people, at least the little area I was in, 2 people ran over the edge to scream at him the same thing back. What is even going on here? What a snapshot of our people and our country. One guy's having something going on, or he thinks he is, and everybody else feels like they have to join in the same derogatory, vulgar, profane tirade. It was quite shocking. I was also thinking, I'm like, it's time to leave Walmart. Okay, I'm out of here. Your calm demeanor stands out. Your clean mouth stands out. Your compassion for struggling coworkers, which that guy clearly didn't have, stands out. Settled faithfulness in the workplace brings prosperity. I love the song. We're not going to sing it now. Little is much if God is in it. And yet no amount of work and sacrifice without God leads to prosperity, safety, or peace. This is the grind that God calls vain. Let's move on here to this bread of sorrow. This is an interesting word picture, an interesting phrase that Solomon chooses to use. He does like talking about bread in Proverbs as well. Rise up early, to sit up late, and what's the end result of that? To eat the bread of sorrows. Did quite a bit of digging to grab hold of this phrase, this word picture that Solomon is using. And the idea is you're eating that anxiety. What your daily life consumes is what is producing this rise up early, go to bed late. It all depends on me, and that churning, layering like thick mud, weight building anxiety, and that is the daily bread. Well, someone said this, it's when what should sustain you becomes what drains you. It's when what should sustain you, bread, becomes what drains you, sorrows. That was really good. The bread that God calls sorrow, it's a life of fear and frustration, of constantly fearing the unknown. Hey, listen, there are a lot of unknowns, and a lot of them are scary. The next medical expense, medical event. The next vehicle or appliance failure. How many of you have had either or both in the last 12 months a vehicle or an appliance fail? Raise your hand. That's almost all of us. Yeah, you have 2 of those happen in 12 months, and you're just looking around, waiting for the next one. And you can hear things going on in your car that you never heard before. I mean, down south, there's a young man in our church after a couple of catastrophic vehicle failures. I mean, after church, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, leaving work, he is under his car with a flashlight looking for anything that might have dripped under the car. He stops before he pulls in a parking spot to look at the parking spot so that he knows for sure if his car left anything. I mean, talk about getting paranoid, getting tragedy had made, not tragedy, but these catastrophes with vehicles had really scarred him, jumpy, always checking around, still does that. I was on the phone with him recently, and he talked about doing that. And I was like, here we are, 10 years later, and we're still like, yeah, it keeps happening. We know how it's like. Fear of the unknown, medical expense, appliance, vehicle failures, the next round of layoffs, whatever it is, we live in this cycle of absorbing this fear of the unknown and thinking it's all on me to prevent it or to build a buffer. And that brings a cycle of frustration as the weight of the load we are expected to carry is infinite as your imagination of the fears. We feel that we can never catch a break unless it's a bone, right? Nothing's going to go right. Can't catch a break unless it's going to be a bone. We feel that people close to us, hey, this is another one here, the cycle of frustration. Along the lines of this cycle, down the road in the circle, we feel that the people close to us are the problem. They're holding us back. Whether it's your spouse, children, coworkers, pastor, other church members, something is holding us back. We're addicted to the hustle gospel. If you're not grinding, you're falling behind. A life of fear and frustration, it's the bread of sorrow. It's a life of bitterness and regret because when it all depends on me, every missed opportunity looms huge. That could have been my promotion. Man, if I only would have jumped on that move in the stock market, commodities, crypto, whatever. If only I would have or could get a different, better job. If we're fixated on lost opportunities, it leads to becoming angry about present circumstances. And it's never fair. We're always upset about how a manager or a boss treats us. Listen, prayer is powerful here. If there's truly a problem, prayer can change hearts, prayer can expose abuse, and prayer can open doors to move out of one place into another place that's better. Being upset. How about being upset about what we're being paid compared to another employee? There's room for prayer and wisdom and negotiation here, but not if we're simply fixated on what I can do or am not able to do. Get upset about the health differences. We have this and other people don't have to deal with this. Have you noticed that nobody's exempt from trouble in life? Well, you're here on Wednesday nights. You do know this. We've got a whole list of it. The bread of sorrow is a life of bitterness and regret, a life of fear and frustration. It's a life of brooding and envying. Bitterness bread. It's replaying losses and wrongs until they become your identity. And your mind devours that same pain every day. We become envious of the success of others. And boy, social media culture does this, doesn't it? Turns every other person's blessings into your own personal torment. I am convinced that your phones do, in fact, listen to you. You sit there and talk about something, and then you go pop on social media and you're melancholy, and everything you look at is an ad for what you talked about, the thing you don't have, can't have, or somebody else that has it. That's not an accident. What do I do about that? Shut it off! Envious of the success of others. They have my dream job. It's not fair. They retired earlier than I can retire, and I deserve it more than they do. They had the time to go do, to go buy, to go visit, to go whatever that I wish I could do. And it doesn't even matter what their success is. If I'm relying on my own achievements to be happy, to feel complete, we will constantly be looking at what we don't have and mad we don't have it. Again, we have a great example in the Bible, the great bad example of King Saul. Saul could not handle someone else being praised. Envy begins when you cannot rejoice at someone else's victory. Then Saul tried to manage David through traps. Envy is always manipulative. Sends him out to kill 200 Philistines or 100 Philistines and bring back trophies. Then Saul's envy made him lash out at innocent people. He nearly kills Jonathan, hurling a javelin at him. And then he did, in fact, kill people, an entire city of priests at Nob over his envy. It's what the bread of sorrow produces. Restlessness, joylessness, irritability, envy, spiritual numbness. Let's get to the good stuff. The grind that God calls vain, the bread that God calls zero, and then the sorrow, and then the rest that God gives his beloved. It is vain for you to rise up early, to sit up late, to eat the bread of sorrows. For so he giveth his beloved sleep. I think that this is true. I read this in studying and I looked into it, and I tend to agree with it. I think Solomon is making a very clever play on words here. In Hebrew, the word giveth his beloved. It is his beloved, and it uses the same word for the name that God gave Solomon in 2 Samuel 12:25, Jedediah, beloved of Jehovah. There is a root word play here. I think it's very intentional by Solomon. He is saying, look, despite all of these things, who is the great builder in Israel? Solomon. Who is the person that acquired so much wisdom and found its emptiness, tested its limits? It's Solomon. Who is at this point, who is writing this and saying, look, I understand you could go burning at both ends, accomplishing all you can accomplish and finding out it's vain, but when you seek the Lord, he gives Jedediah. He gives his beloved sleep, rest. The reward of seeking God throughout the journey of life is rest. A good synonym would be peace. When you can trust God for what you cannot control, that is freeing. And it gives rest. Not laziness, a restful trust, where you can work hard without working yourself to death. We trust God to lead and to guide. We trust God to give you favor in the workplace and outside of it. We trust God to open new doors and to show you when current doors are shut. My mother-in-law has on her wall in her bedroom big piece of wall art, and it says, "Give it to God and go to sleep." Give it to God and go to sleep. I think that's excellent. Trust God and go to sleep. Rest in God's power. No, you can't do it yourself. Give it to the Lord and go to sleep. Rest in God's justice. Yes, it is wrong. And trust it to the judge of all the earth who can only do right. And go to sleep. Rest in God's forgiveness. He saved you. He will forgive you when you confess your sin. So give it to God and go to sleep. One commentator said it this way: "Begone, dull worrying care. Let me rest, sweet faith and hope. Close mine eyes and still my heart. Jesus, give me sleep, and in sleeping give me my heart's desire, that I may awake and be satisfied." Last thoughts here this evening. Some practical steps to stop living on the bread of sorrow. Continue working hard, but refuse that pressured panic work. If we can't pray while we plan and trust God as we put that plan to work, you're probably trying to be your own God. Replace envy with worship. It takes training. Train your mouth to bless God instead of brooding over what you wish you could have had. Thirdly, release. Let go of those old losses and wrongs, not because they were not real, because you will not allow them to rule your life today. Give them to the Lord. And then as we build, as we work, let's do so in obedience. Do your duty. Then go to sleep like someone who knows that God is on the throne. It's vain for you to rise up early, to sit up late, and to eat the bread of sorrows. For so he giveth his beloved sleep. So tonight, let's take some of those things to the Lord that we've been holding on to. God's Holy Spirit tonight has knocked on your heart's door on the matter of having an idol of control. And it's time to burn the idol and give the control where it belongs. Do your part, plan well, work hard, give it to the Lord, and go to sleep. Not quite yet. Now it's time to pray. You're dismissed to pray.